Now, the spiritual path is also like a school, and the school has both classes and tests. As a teacher, and I have been a teacher for more than 40 years now, I used to say that instead of having examination-oriented teaching, we should have teaching-oriented exams. Therefore, when a person develops a cancer, once again, it is generally a combination of the cells dividing rapidly, and at the same time, the immunological surveillance of the person becoming weak. The immune system has become weak. Today we'll continue with the series that I have been doing on some passages from this work by the mother, The Great Adventure. The passages that we'll take up today are on pages 109 and 110 and are on the general topic of dealing with adverse forces. Now, what are these adverse forces? It's something which could be within us, or it could be something outside us, something visible and understandable, and something totally mysterious. And quite often the mother has referred to these adverse forces as something mysterious, something which is there in the universal air, or something which is there in the atmosphere, which has an adverse effect on us, particularly if we are on the spiritual path. Then it seems that there are some elements that are interested in blocking that progress, in obstructing that progress, and that's how these forces make their appearance. Can there be something like that, something so mysterious? You know, in common language sometimes we say that if something is going well, you should not talk too much about it or display it, nazar lag jayegi, that you'll catch the evil influence of an evil eye. Now, are there some such mysterious things? Well, certainly, I mean, one cannot rule it out, because we can't say that what we can easily observe or understand rationally is the outer limit of all truth and possibilities. And this is something which the physicists, who are the most hardcore among the scientists, would probably be the first ones to acknowledge these days. Because so many of their findings in modern physics are completely contrary to common sense. We have an engineering student here who may be studying physics, and another expert in physics here. Yahi hai na? At the higher level in physics, you have so many things which are completely contrary to common sense. And therefore, to say that how can that be is something which is not really scientific, and therefore we have to keep our mind open to it. Coming to a little more practical sort of aspect of this, if we say that these forces are only limited to what is clearly visible and understandable, then if it is within us, it becomes difficult to fight it. How can we fight ourselves? Something which is a part of us. And if we say that it is in somebody else outside us, then we treat somebody else as an enemy. If you ascribe it to a mysterious force, a mysterious adverse force, then you can deal with it as something outside, you can deal with it ruthlessly, and yet you are not creating an enemy, you are not annoying anybody. So at least there's one practical advantage in considering these adverse forces to be some mysterious forces that are outside us. Now let's see what the mother has said in these passages. I'll first go through page 109. In this passage, the mother says, "Attacks from adverse forces are inevitable. You have to take them as tests on your way and go courageously through the ordeal. The struggle may be hard, but when you come out of it, you have gained something, you have advanced a step. There is even a necessity for the existence of the hostile forces, They make your determination stronger, your aspiration clearer. In any case, when an attack comes, the wisest attitude is to consider that it comes from outside and to say, this is not myself and I'll have nothing to do with it. You have to deal in the same way with all lower impulses and desires and all doubts and questionings in the mind. If you identify yourself with them, the difficulty in fighting them becomes all the greater, for then you have the feeling that you are facing the never easy task of overcoming your own nature. But once you are able to say, no, this is not myself, I'll have nothing to do with it, it becomes much easier to disperse them. Now let's go over it slowly. Attacks from adverse forces are inevitable. You have to take them as tests on your way and go courageously through the ordeal. So instead of looking at the adverse force as something unfortunate, treat it as a test. Now the spiritual path is also like a school, and the school has both classes and tests. And in fact, if we look at life, all life is in fact made up of basically these two things which serve as lessons for us to learn, and things which test how much we have learned. So these adverse forces are also tests. And what is a good test? A good test is not just that which evaluates us. Of course, some degree of self-evaluation is necessary, but a good test is one which also ends up teaching the student something. Very often we talk of examination-oriented teaching, and we say that, well, nobody admits of liking it, and yet it goes on a lot. Examination-oriented teaching. As a teacher, and I have been a teacher for more than 40 years now, I used to say that instead of having examination-oriented teaching, we should have teaching-oriented exams, learning-oriented exams. That is the type of exams that these tests are in life, because they give us an opportunity to see how much progress we have made. You see, so long as we are just reading nice books, listening to nice satsangs, and everything is going well, it is easy to imagine that I have made a lot of spiritual progress. But when comes an adverse influence, something which is in the form of a struggle, a temptation, a conflict, an obligation, then we find that very often we are found wanting. So these tests give us an opportunity to reflect and look within and actually find out how much progress we have made, and then from this results a lesson. So the test itself becomes a lesson, and it helps us make more progress. So once we discover that through these adverse circumstances where we are wanting, what we have to do is to go through it courageously. And then the mother goes on, the struggle may be hard, but when you come out of it, you have gained something, you have advanced a step. There is even a necessity for the existence of the hostile forces. They make your determination stronger, your aspiration clearer. So as in any education system, some amount of testing is necessary, and these tests are in fact necessary on the spiritual path. When we face such a test, first begins a struggle. Struggle is this inner churning by which we are forced to reflect upon what is going on within us. And this introspection, which goes on for some time, helps us resolve the issue, helps us make some resolutions for the future, how we will improve, how we will conduct ourselves, what type of a choice we will make if we are in a similar situation in future. And through this process of introspection, which is affecting us at a deep level, there gets sort of engraved in us in a rather strong way an influence which then we are less likely to forget, and actually we are able to use it at the next opportunity. Because something which has been just learned superficially once, say through a book or through a satsang or something, can be easily forgotten. But something which has been learnt through this process of inner churning, after facing an adverse situation, is more difficult to forget. For example, suppose you learn something about how to repair, say, a puncture in the tire. How to change the tire, say the tire is punctured, how to remove it and then put the stepney in position. You read everything about it and you think you know it. But then what is the time when we really know whether we know it, and once we go through that process, we'll never forget it? That happens only when we actually have a puncture. So when you have a puncture and you find that you are forced to actually change the wheel, then only you really know that you really know it, and then after that you are quite sure you'll never forget it. So these adverse circumstances are that sort of tests which lead to learning, which endures, which is durable, and that can come only through these adverse circumstances, and that's why the mother says that they are necessary. Now, when there is a flat tire, initially one is upset and one goes through a phase of anxiety and sorrow, and that's why the mother says initially the struggle will be painful, it will be difficult, but finally it will lead to some learning, and that learning is always sweet, that is something desirable. So while the struggle is difficult and painful, the fruit is sweet. Something like it's the churning of the ocean. We are all familiar with that ancient Indian mythological tale of the churning of the ocean, the Sagar Manthan. The Asuras on one side and the Devas on the other side, the gods and the demons churning the sea. Now what comes out of it first? They are looking for Amrit, but what comes first? First comes the poison. So pehle poison hi aata na. So through the struggle also, what comes first is the difficulties, the struggle, the pain. But then finally the fruit is sweet, finally the fruit is Amrit. So the struggle may be hard, but when you come out of it, you have gained something, you have advanced a step. There is even a necessity for the existence of the hostile forces. They make your determination stronger, your aspiration clearer. In any case, when an attack comes, the wisest attitude is to consider that it comes from outside and to say, this is not myself, and I'll have nothing to do with it. You have to deal in the same way with all lower impulses and desires and all doubts and questionings in the mind. If you identify yourself with them, the difficulty in fighting them becomes all the greater, for then you have the feeling that you are facing the never easy task of overcoming your own nature. But once you are able to say, no, this is not myself, I'll have nothing to do with it, it becomes much easier to disperse them. Now here, the mother says that consider it as if it is coming from outside, it is not myself. Now this is based on a deep spiritual truth that basically we are all divine. The most fundamental reality of each one of us is our soul, which is a spark of the divine and therefore perfect. It is all-knowing, all-powerful. It has no desire, it has no anger, it has none of these negative impulses which we observe on the surface. All this distortion is only on the surface, but deep within we are all divine, and therefore the most essential reality of each one of us is the divine perfection. So basically we are all good, although we may appear highly imperfect on the surface. So this is based on that principle, and therefore if there is any adverse force, we should say that, well, this is not me, it is from outside me, and deal with it accordingly. However, there are traditions in which man is considered basically evil. That man is basically a sinner, and therefore he has to be redeemed by God. So that is also a way of looking. In practice, you may say that it really makes no difference, because whether you consider the person to be basically bad and therefore requiring redemption, which means the possibility of some sort of redemption or transformation does exist, or whether you say the person is potentially divine, essentially divine, but on the surface it is so distorted that the person has to work on himself and also depend upon divine grace for making some progress, for moving towards that perfection which is within. In practice, what difference does it make? Because you are accepting the imperfection of the man as he is constituted, as he appears to be, and from there you have to move towards what is better. But on the whole, if you consider yourself potentially divine, to be potentially perfect, to be in a sense good, and whatever is evil to be only on the surface, as belonging not to the person but as if coming from outside, it is easier to deal with, because as the mother says, how can you fight something which is an integral part of you? Something which you consider to be yourself is more difficult to fight than if it is coming from outside. Now this distinction, whether a person is basically good or bad, becomes even more important when we are dealing with somebody else. Because spirituality is not only about how we look at ourselves, but it is even more about our interactions with others. And this becomes very important there, because we can be very partial to ourselves, and therefore if we say that the person is basically evil, then we would say, well, I am evil because I have been made that way. So we have transferred sort of the responsibility for our evil nature to the maker. The one who has made us has made me like that, and therefore I am evil. So that way I have sort of passed on the responsibility there, and I am sort of justifying why I am so. And therefore if I make a mistake, I can say that, well, that is how I have been constituted. I am basically evil. The maker has made me like that, and therefore I couldn't help it. And probably I can't go beyond a point. I will stay as I am, because that is how I have been constituted. But when it comes to somebody else, then we forget that the maker is the same. Then we say, if this person is evil, it is because this person is bad, it is his fault. And therefore, I am justified in hating him and harming him. So our standards are different when we apply it to ourselves, and standards are quite different when we apply it to somebody else. On the other hand, if we said that, well, human beings are essentially good, essentially they are all divine, and that the evil is only on the surface, then you are taking responsibility and saying that, well, I can change myself to bring out what is within me and reject what is coming from outside or what is only on the surface. That I can easily reject. And when it comes to somebody else, well, that person is also potentially divine, maybe imperfect on the surface, but then I am also imperfect, and therefore we may be differently imperfect, but all the same, I do not have to hate this person, I don't have to harm this person. This person is just like me. My fundamental reality and his fundamental reality is the same. We are both essentially divine, and therefore I may not like certain things in him, but I can still love him. We don't have to like everything in everybody, but there's still, that doesn't mean that we cannot love everybody. So, which means that we can love even an enemy if we can see the divine in that person. And therefore, this sort of way of looking at a person as essentially divine, the fundamental reality of each one of us being the soul, which is a spark of the same creator, is something which helps us deal with our own imperfections in a more responsible way, and also helps us extend a hand of friendship and love to others in spite of our finding them imperfect and wanting in certain ways. So that is in the sort of positive part of looking at the person as essentially good. Now let me go to the next page, page 110, which is on the same subject. It's a continuation of the same topic. The most important thing to do when you are attacked by an adverse force is to say to yourself, yes, the force comes from outside and the attack is there, but there must certainly be a correspondence in my nature, otherwise it could not have attacked me. Well, I'm going to look and find within me what allows this force to come, and I'm going to send it back or transform it or put the light of consciousness upon it so that it may be converted, or drive it away so that it remains no longer within me. There is a way, isn't it? When the force comes, the adverse force, when it attacks, the part which corresponds rushes out to meet it. It goes forward, a kind of meeting takes place. If at that time, instead of being altogether overwhelmed or taken by surprise and off your guard, you observe very closely what it was within you that vibrated, it makes that sound, tut tut tut, another thing that has entered. Then you catch it. At that moment, you catch it and say to it, get out with your friends, I do not want you any longer. So this passage deals more with how to deal with such an adverse force. The most important thing to do when you are attacked by an adverse force is to say to yourself, yes, the force comes from outside and the attack is there, but there must certainly be a correspondence in my nature, otherwise it could not have attacked me well. Now what it means is that there is something corresponding to that adverse force within us, even if it is on the surface, but it is somewhere there. Which means that no adverse force can really affect us unless we admit it, unless we allow it an entry, unless we have a certain amount of receptivity to it, unless we give some consent to it. So that consent is necessary for the adverse force to be able to affect us. And therefore, when we get influenced by an adverse force, the first thing we should try and see is that what is it that within my nature corresponds to it, which has welcomed it, which has allowed it this entry, which gave its consent for it to affect us. Now this is an important point, because the mother has said that no matter what evil influences may be around us, unless we give that consent, they are not able to affect us. To some extent that applies also to the positive influences, because the positive influences also, when they are around us, we can really benefit from them if we have receptivity. And this goes on all life. Even at the point of death, the mother says that a person actually does not die till the person, at least for a moment, has given that consent, well, let it be. So when the person says let it be, which means now I'm ready to go, it's only after that that the person actually goes. So that entry is important at all levels, whether it is to an adverse force, whether it is to the spiritual influence and uplifting influence, or whether it is giving consent for death. So the most important thing to do when you are attacked by an adverse force is to say to yourself, yes, the force comes from outside and the attack is there, but there must certainly be a correspondence in my nature, otherwise it could not have attacked me. Well, I'm going to look and find within me what allows this force to come, and I'm going to send it back or transform it or put the light of consciousness upon it so that it may be converted, or drive it away so that it remains no longer within me. So here the mother has given a way of sort of few alternative ways of approaching the situation. Once we have sort of become vigilant and observed how is it that this adverse force has been able to affect us, then one thing we can do is to send it back, which means reject it. Now this can happen if we are very vigilant and we have just observed it when it is trying to enter. So that is the time when we can send it back. We detect this is trying to come to us. There is a part within me which might go and shake hands with it. I'll not let that happen. Instead, I'll just send it back. So we nip the evil in the bud, we reject it. The second thing we can do is to transform it, which means that, well, everything is a manifestation of the divine, and therefore, can it be transformed into a better version? Now, this transformation or sublimation or changing an evil force for the good is something which again we are familiar with in the spiritual paths. In Sri Aurobindo and the Mother's philosophy, we often talk of transformation of both the vital and the mental. That is, vital is the basic emotions and the mental is the intellect. When the vital gets transformed, it starts speaking in the same language as the soul or the psychic being. Now, how can that happen? Because what the vital or the emotional part of the being wants is happiness. When it gets transformed, it still wants happiness, but now it can distinguish two types of happiness. There is a happiness that comes, for example, when we get a new dress or we get a new car. There's also an happiness which comes when you help somebody. Both are different types of happiness. And when the emotional part of the being can distinguish between these two and show a preference for the happiness which comes from helping somebody, then the emotional part of the being is speaking in the same voice as the soul. And the transformation of the intellect can also work in the same way. The intellect works through reasoning. So, when the intellect starts inventing those reasons which justify the voice of the soul, then we find that the intellect also becomes a collaborator of the soul. They are no longer in conflict. So, the vital and the mental can be transformed. But when it comes to individual emotions, they can also be transformed. You would have heard of the transformation or sublimation of the sex instinct. One of the basic instincts, and yet that energy can be transformed. Across traditions there is an insistence on abstinence so that sex energy can be transformed and sublimated and can be used for a higher purpose. So, it's possible to transform all types of things and any adverse influence. So, I'm going to send it back or transform it or put the light of consciousness upon it. Now, what it means is, we have the supreme consciousness within in the form of our soul. Now, if we let that light illuminate this dark force, then it will no longer be hidden. It will show up in its true form, in its true reality. And then we can reject it. So, instead of brushing it under the carpet, we have exposed it. We have made it visible by shining that light of the soul on it. And when we do that, it may be converted, which means it may again be transformed, or drive it away so that it remains no longer within me. So, depending on the type of adverse influence or adverse force, they may require different types of treatment, but then this is another approach, and that is to drive it away. It is a little different from sending it back. Sending it back is possible if we notice it right in the beginning. If it has made some inroads, then it's not just sending it back, it is driving it away. So, if one were to sort of simplify these four approaches, the first is to send it back, which means to reject it. The second is to put the light of the consciousness upon it, and that is to expose it. The third is to transform it, and the fourth is to drive it away, which is to expel it. So, we may reject it, we may expose it, we may transform it, or we may expel it. So, these are the different ways, and different approaches may suit different people, and also different approaches may be more appropriate for the particular adverse force that we are dealing with. When the force comes, when it attacks, the part which corresponds rushes out to meet it, it goes forward. So, that is when we have to check ourselves, be vigilant. A kind of meeting takes place. If at that time, instead of being altogether overwhelmed or taken by surprise and off your guard, you observe very closely what it was within you that vibrated, then you can catch it. At that moment, you catch it and say to it, "Get out with your friends, I do not want you any longer." Which means essentially it's a question of eternal vigilance. Remain vigilant, do not be caught off guard. It's something similar to what happens in the body. In the body we have the immune system, which deals with germs when they enter the body. These germs come to us from outside, and the body has a way of distinguishing between what comes from outside and what belongs to the body. See the distinction between self and non-self. And through this distinction, the body is able to eliminate any germs that enter the body, and that is why we fall ill much less often than we do. And when we do fall ill, it is rarely because of the germ alone, it is also because the host resistance, as we call it. We are sort of hosts, the germ is the guest. So the resistance of the host, when it has gone down, then that is the time when we catch the illness. So both the things are important, which means that the germ of course is there, but then its entry is necessary to get the disease, but it's not sufficient to produce the disease. To produce the disease, we also have to be weak in terms of our resistance. We have to be caught off guard, so to say. Our vigilance has fallen, our vigilance level has gone down. Now this is how we deal with agents like the germs which come from outside. But then, as in case of adverse forces, we also have something corresponding to it within us. And the same thing happens in the body. Corresponding to it, what we have within the body is the cells which undergo a malignant change. We have cells dividing in the body all the time to replace dead cells. Cells are dying and are getting replaced by new cells. For example, cells on the surface of the intestine, cells on the surface of skin. Now, these are cells which are exposed to so much trauma, and therefore they are dying at a very fast rate. They are on the surface and therefore they are being traumatized and they are dying, and there is a mechanism by which they get replaced from the deeper layers where the cells multiply, and it is such an exact process that we don't even come to know about it. The number of cells dying is exactly the same as the number of new cells being produced, and the new cells are not only the same in number, they are also of exactly the same type as the cells that have died, and therefore superficially everything seems to be the same. However, once in a while something can go wrong with this cell cycle, and the cells that are produced as a result of this division may be more than the cells that are dying, and when that happens, generally also what happens is that these cells are not of the same type. They are different type of cells. Generally they are the type of cells which cannot function properly. They are poorly differentiated, which means they do not have the special features of the skin cell or the intestinal cell or the liver cell. Instead, they are more sort of general purpose in nature, which can really do nothing specialized in that organ. So far as that organ is concerned, they are quite useless. Now, these useless cells multiplying at a high rate is what we call cancer cells. Now, once in a while, something going wrong with the cell cycle is not surprising. It's a very delicately balanced process, and therefore once in a while something can go wrong with it, and it does. But then so many such cells which start multiplying are not even noticed by us because they never develop into a cancer. And that happens because when the cells start multiplying like that, then these cells are also identified by the immune system of the body as foreign. Although they are developing within the body, the immune system treats them as if they have come from outside, like the germ, and it eliminates them, which means that there is an immunological surveillance in place in the body, which is dealing not only with the germs coming from outside, but also with the cancer cells which are developing within the body. And therefore, when a person develops a cancer, once again, it is generally a combination of the cells dividing rapidly, and at the same time, the immunological surveillance of the person becoming weak. The immune system has become weak, and that is why the cancer develops. So you find actually a very exact correspondence whether we are dealing with it at the gross level, at the level of the body becoming ill as a result of hostile organisms like some germs entering the body, or some rogue cells in the body which start multiplying at a very fast rate. In either case, we are vulnerable, and what helps us survive more efficiently and more successfully is the immunological surveillance, is this eternal vigilance. And when we are off guard, when this vigilance drops, when the immune system becomes incompetent, that is the time when the person is more likely to fall ill due to an infection, and he is also more likely to fall ill due to a tumor. Both the things become more likely. And That's why we find both these types of things are more common at the extremes of age. A very young child whose immune system is still developing is the one who is more vulnerable to these things, and an old person, because of aging, because of the process of aging, his immune system is also becoming weaker, and that's why that person is also more vulnerable to both infections and cancers. But then it can happen at other stages in life also, not only at these two extremes. And once again we find that it generally happens when the immune system has become weak. And what can we do to keep the immune system strong? Very simple things, basically. Keeping ourselves physically active, eating the right type of food in the right amount with the right attitude, not putting into the body harmful substances like tobacco and alcohol, sleeping enough. Today only the headline I saw in the newspaper was that the children are not sleeping enough, and therefore somebody in the UK has suggested that schools should start late in the morning, because the children are these days sleeping very late because they are on the net and so on, and therefore the schools should start late in the morning. For teenagers, he says, the schools should start at 11 a.m. But I mean, this overlooks the fact that it's not just the duration of sleep which is important, but the time at which you sleep and get up is also important. It's not that sleeping from 2 a.m. to 8 a.m. is the same as sleeping from 9 a.m. to 4 a.m. 9 p.m. to 4 a.m. is also 6 hours, and 2 to 8 is also 6 hours. 2 a.m. to 8 a.m. is also 6 hours, but these 2 6 hours are not equivalent. So anyway, so sleeping enough, and last but not least, in fact, most important perhaps, is being happy. If we are mentally relaxed, we are happy, we are cheerful, then many of these physical factors, even if they are not absolutely right, can be overcome. Psychological factors can override physical factors, and therefore we find that it is when a person gets a cancer, irrespective of age, you find that it is extremely common, if you go back to that person's history, that within the last 3 to 4 years, the person has experienced some major trauma, or in general, throughout life, that person has had more than his or her share of adverse events. These are two things which you find pretty common, more commonly than could be explained purely by chance. So anyway, I just digressed a bit because these are things of which are of general interest. Everybody is interested in staying healthy. So that's why I drifted. But then sort of what it boils down to is that whether it is physical well-being or whether it is spiritual well-being, in both cases we are vulnerable. We have adverse forces which can affect us from outside and from within us. And in both cases, it is possible to prevent these by staying eternally vigilant, by not being caught off guard.